The last ember. The quantum engines of the diplomatic vessel Nexus hummed with a rhythm that Elara Reeves had long ago learned to find comforting. Standing at the observation deck, she pressed her palm against the transparent aluminum viewport, feeling the subtle vibration of the ship's propulsion system as it carried them through the void between stars. She was the last known human in the galaxy, or so everyone believed. Nearly a century had passed since Earth's destruction. The official records claimed it was a natural disaster, a cascade of solar flares that rendered the planet uninhabitable in less than a day. Only those humans already off-world survived, and over the decades, their numbers had dwindled until Elara stood as the final representative of her species. "Ambassador Reeves, your presence is requested in the command center," came the melodic voice of Trill, the ship's Volbraxian communications officer, through the ship's internal comms. Elara sighed, her breath creating a momentary fog on the viewport. "On my way." The corridors of the Nexus were designed to accommodate dozens of species from across the Galactic Alliance. Ceilings soared high to allow for the towering Jaxari, while lower passages branched off for the diminutive Prill. Environmental controls shifted subtly as she walked, adjusting temperature and atmospheric composition to maintain comfort for all. In the command center, Captain Zorl stood with his forearms clasped behind his back, his crystalline exoskeleton catching the light from nearby consoles. 3 of his eyes swiveled toward Elara as she entered. The 4th remained fixed on the holographic display at the center of the room. "Ambassador," Zorl greeted her, his voice a rumble of harmonics that made her teeth vibrate slightly. "We've detected something unusual, something I believe you should see." Elara approached the holographic display, which showed a star map of an unexplored sector. The pulsing red dot marked a point in deep space, far from any known inhabited systems. "What am I looking at?" she asked. Trill, whose translucent tentacles were interfaced with the ship's communications array, disengaged one appendage to manipulate the display. A signal. Weak, intermittent, but unmistakable. It's human in origin. Elara's heart stuttered in her chest. "That's impossible." "Nevertheless," Captain Zorl said, "our analysis confirms it. The signal contains embedded patterns consistent with late 21st century Earth communications protocols. Protocols that have not been used since the fall." Elara finished. Her fingers trembled as she reached toward the hologram, watching the signal pulse like a distant heartbeat. "How long has it been broadcasting?" "Unknown," Trill replied. "It was only detected because we're traversing this sector for the diplomatic mission to the Ort Collective. The signal is encrypted, but the encryption itself is recognizably human." "Can you decode it?" Elara asked, unable to mask the desperate hope in her voice. Trill's tentacles writhed in a gesture of uncertainty. "Partially. It appears to be a distress call, but much of the content remains scrambled." Captain Zorl's primary eyes narrowed. "The Galactic Council has strict protocols about unexplored regions. We're already pushing boundaries by traveling this far from established routes." Elara turned to face him, drawing herself up to her full height, still barely reaching the middle of Zorl's torso. "Captain, if there are humans out there, any humans, I have to know. As the Alliance Ambassador for Human Affairs, it's literally my only job to represent humanity's interests." "Your job," Zorl countered, "is to maintain the historical and cultural legacy of Earth within the Alliance framework. Chasing ghost signals is not in your mandate." "With respect, Captain," she said, her voice hardening, "I decide what my mandate includes when it comes to human matters. If that signal is from human survivors, they've been alone for decades, possibly unaware that anyone else even survived." The command center fell silent. The various alien officers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable to most, but Elara had spent her life learning to interpret the subtle cues of different species. Zorl's secondary arms unfolded, a sign he was considering her words. "The diplomatic mission to the Ort Collective is time-sensitive." "Then drop me off with a shuttle," Elara suggested. I can investigate and rendezvous with you on the return journey." "Absolutely not," said Trill, her voice resonating with concern. "That sector is dangerous. There are reports of void marauders operating in the area, not to mention the spatial anomalies that have claimed dozens of vessels." Ilara stared at the pulsing signal, unable to look away. For her entire life, she had been a relic, a living museum piece representing a dead world. The last human. Special, but ultimately alone. The possibility of others, of not being the end of her kind's story, was too powerful to ignore. "I've spent 20 years serving the Alliance," she said quietly. "I've mediated disputes, facilitated treaties, represented Earth's memory with dignity. I've never asked for anything in return." She looked up, meeting Zorl's gaze. "I'm asking now." The command center was silent save for the soft beeping of instruments. Zorl's crystalline form shifted slightly as he consulted a private channel on his neural interface. "The Ort Collective can wait," he finally said. "We will investigate this signal, but with extreme caution. If we encounter any significant danger, we withdraw immediately." "Is that understood, Ambassador?" Relief flooded through Ilara. "Understood, Captain. Thank you." As the Nexus altered course toward the mysterious signal, Ilara returned to her quarters. The room was a careful recreation of human living spaces, a gesture from the Alliance to help her maintain connection with her heritage. Bookshelves lined one wall. Actual physical books, preserved from Earth or printed from digital archives. A small potted plant, descended from Earth stock, sat on her desk. She accessed her personal terminal and began reviewing everything the ship's database had on the sector they were heading toward. It was sparse. The region had been charted only by long-range scanners, never physically explored. A chime at her door interrupted her research. "Enter," she called. Dr. Neves, the ship's xenobiologist, stepped inside. Her insectoid form moved with delicate precision, multifaceted eyes gleaming. "I heard about the signal," Neves said, mandibles clicking softly. "I thought you might want to talk." Ilara leaned back in her chair. Neves was one of the few aboard she considered a friend rather than just a colleague. "What do you think? Am I chasing ghosts?" Neves' antennae twitched in thought. "The universe is vast and full of unlikely possibilities. I've learned never to discount any of them entirely." She settled onto a specially designed perch near Ilara's desk. "But I'm concerned about what we might find." "What do you mean?" "If there are humans out there," Neves explained, "they've been isolated for generations. They may have developed entirely different cultural pathways, different values. They might not be what you're hoping for." Ilara nodded slowly. "I've considered that. But even if they're different, even if they've changed in ways I can't imagine, they're still human, still connected to Earth. And what if the signal is a trap?" Neves asked gently. "The Void Marauders are known to use bait transmissions." "That's a risk I have to take," Ilara said firmly. "I can't ignore this." "I won't." Nev's mandibles clicked in what Ilara recognized as resignation. "Then I'll help however I can. I've already begun preparing adaptations to our medical facilities in case we do find human survivors." "Thank you," Ilara said, touched by her friend's support. After Neves left, Ilara sat alone, staring at the star charts on her terminal. Somewhere out there, someone was sending a signal in an ancient human code. Whether it was survivors, an automated beacon, or a trap, she would find out. For the first time in years, she felt the weight of being humanity's sole representative lift slightly. The ember of hope, long banked to near extinction within her, flared to new life. The journey to the signal's origin took 3 standard days. Each hour brought new anxiety as the signal strengthened, confirming they were on the right track. Ilara barely slept, spending most of her time either on the bridge or in her quarters analyzing the fragments of the message they'd managed to decode. "Approaching final coordinates," announced the navigation officer, a Tellurian whose body was composed primarily of a dense mineral lattice. Ilara stood beside Captain Zorl on the bridge, her hands clasped tightly behind her back to hide their trembling. The view screen showed only empty space, no planets, no ships, no signs of habitation. "Full sensor sweep," Zorel ordered. The bridge crew worked in coordinated silence, their various appendages manipulating controls designed for their specific physiologies. "Signal source identified," Trill announced. "It's small. Too small to be a habitat or ship." Ilara's heart sank. "A probe?" "Possibly," Trill replied. Moving to visual range, the view screen zoomed in, revealing a small object tumbling slowly through space. It was clearly human-made, a satellite of some kind, its solar panels partially damaged. "It's an old Earth communications satellite," Ilara realized. "Pre-fall technology." Disappointment crashed through her, but curiosity quickly followed. "But what's it doing out here?" "Earth satellites couldn't have drifted this far on their own. It appears to have been modified," said the ship's engineer, a Voxan named Wren, whose body was a complex arrangement of geometric shapes that shifted depending on his current function. "Those aren't standard components attached to its main body." "Can we bring it aboard?" Ilara asked. Zorel considered this. "Tractor beam should be sufficient. Wren, prepare the cargo bay for retrieval." Full quarantine protocols. Within the hour, the satellite was secured in the cargo bay. Ilara, dressed in a protective suit despite assurances it was unnecessary, approached the ancient piece of technology with reverence. It was unmistakably of Earth origin. She recognized the faded NASA logo still visible on one panel. "The modifications are extensive," Wren observed, hovering nearby in his environmental field. "Someone repurposed this satellite long after it was originally deployed." Ilara circled the satellite, examining every detail. "The signal originated from here, but this wasn't its original purpose. Someone adapted it to broadcast." With careful precision, Wren opened the satellite's main access panel. Inside was a jumble of wires and components, some original, others clearly added later with different technology. "There," Ilara said, pointing to a small data core nestled amid the circuitry. "That's not standard for this model." Wren extracted the core with delicate manipulators. "It's a storage device, primitive by our standards, but functional." They brought the core to the ship's laboratory, where it could be safely interfaced with their systems. Trill joined them, her tentacles connecting directly to the translation matrix. "It contains a message," Trill announced, "and coordinates." A holographic projection appeared above the lab table, the face of a human woman, her features weathered by age, eyes bright with determination. "This message is for any human survivors who might still exist among the stars." The recording began. "My name is Commander Sophia Chen of the Earth colony ship Artemis. We escaped Earth before the fall, carrying 10,000 colonists in cryostasis. If you're receiving this, our primary communications must have failed." Ilara's breath caught in her throat. "We've established our colony on a planet we've named Novaterra, in the Cygnus Reach. We believe we may be the last humans alive, but we send this message in hope that others might have survived. If you're out there, if anyone is listening, we've left a breadcrumb trail of these modified satellites. Follow them to us. Earth is gone, but humanity endures." The message ended, leaving Ilara staring at empty air where the projection had been. "Coordinates," she whispered. "Trill, can you identify the location?" Trill's tentacles worked rapidly. "The Cygnus Reach is far beyond Alliance territory, Ambassador. It's uncharted, considered too dangerous for standard navigation. But the coordinates are clear." Ilara pressed. "Yes," Trill admitted. "The coordinates indicate a path through a series of similar beacons, leading deeper into the Reach." Captain Zorel, who had joined them midway through the recording, made a sound like grinding crystals, his species equivalent of clearing his throat. "Ambassador Reeves," he said formally, "I must remind you that the Nexus is a diplomatic vessel with specific mission parameters. We are not equipped for long-range exploration into uncharted space." Ilara turned to face him, her expression set with determination. "Captain, there's a human colony out there. Thousands of people who think they're alone in the universe. People who need to know about the Alliance, about what happened after Earth. And they've survived this long without that knowledge," Zorl countered. "The Ort collective negotiations can still happen," Ilara interrupted. "Drop me at the nearest Alliance outpost. I'll find another way to reach Novaterra." "That would be suicide," Trill interjected. "No single pilot vessel could navigate the hazards of the Cygnus Reach." Ilara looked from one alien face to another, seeing concern, hesitation, and in some, a reluctant understanding. These beings, so different from her in form and thought, had become her community in the absence of her own kind. But the pull of discovering she was not the last human was overwhelming. "Then what do you suggest?" she asked, struggling to keep frustration from her voice. Zorl's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign he was processing multiple streams of thought. "We will report this discovery to the Alliance Council and request a proper expedition be mounted, with appropriate ships, security, and diplomatic personnel." "That could take months," Ilara protested. "Years, even given the Council's deliberation processes." "It is the proper procedure," Zorl insisted. Ilara was about to argue further when an alarm blared throughout the ship. The bridge officer's voice came over the comms. "Captain to the bridge. Unknown vessels approaching at high velocity." The argument forgotten, they rushed to the bridge. On the main view screen, 3 sleek ships had appeared, their designs unlike any Alliance vessel. "They're hailing us," the communications officer reported. "On screen," Zorl ordered. The view screen shifted to show the interior of one of the approaching vessels. A humanoid figure sat in what appeared to be the captain's chair, but the similarities to humans ended there. Their skin was a deep blue-black, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. Where eyes should be, they had a single horizontal band that glowed with a pale white light. "Alliance vessel," the figure spoke, their voice unnaturally deep. "You have recovered property that belongs to the Void Consortium. Return it immediately, or we will be forced to take action." Zorl stepped forward. "I am Captain Zorl of the Alliance diplomatic vessel, Nexus. We are in unclaimed space, and we have violated no territorial boundaries." "The satellite," the alien commander replied, "contains information vital to Consortium interests. Your retrieval of it constitutes theft." Ilara moved to Zorl's side. "How could an ancient Earth satellite be of interest to the Consortium?" she asked quietly. The alien commander tilted their head, the luminous band narrowing. "A human," they observed. "Interesting. Perhaps we can arrange a trade. The satellite data for information about your species. Humans are quite rare these days, are they not?" A chill ran down Ilara's spine. The Void Consortium was known for many things, none of them pleasant. Their interest in humans couldn't be benign. "Captain," she whispered, "they know about the colony. They must." Zorl made a subtle gesture for her to remain silent. "We are conducting routine salvage operations," he told the Consortium commander. "The object in question appears to be derelict technology of historical interest only." "Your scans will have told you otherwise," the commander replied. "We will board your vessel and retrieve what is ours. Prepare to be boarded." The transmission cut off. "Shields up," Zorl ordered immediately. "All hands to battle stations." Ilara gripped the railing as the ship's alert status changed, lights dimming to combat levels, defensive systems coming online. "They're moving to surround us," reported the tactical officer. "Trill," Zorl said, "prepare a burst transmission to Alliance headquarters. Include all data on the satellite and the human colony coordinates." "Captain," Ilara said urgently, "we can't let them get those coordinates, if they're after the human colony." "I'm aware, Ambassador," Zorl replied, his voice sharp with tension. "But we are outnumbered and outgunned. The Nexus is not a warship." Outside, the Consortium vessels moved with practiced precision, cutting off any escape route. "They're powering weapons," the tactical officer announced. Zoral's crystalline form seemed to harden. Evasive maneuvers. Prepare for emergency jump. The jump drive needs 3 minutes to charge, the engineering station reported. We don't have 3 minutes, Zoral replied grimly. The first shots from the consortium ships struck the Nexus shields, causing the entire vessel to shudder. Ilara held tight to the railing, watching as the bridge crew worked frantically to keep the ship intact. Shields at 80%, someone called out. Ilara knew what she had to do. If the consortium was after the human colony, they couldn't be allowed to get those coordinates. And if the Nexus couldn't escape, "Captain," she said, her voice steadied despite her racing heart, "I need access to a shuttle." Zoral spared her a glance, all 4 eyes widening in realization. "Ambassador, no. The consortium wants the data, and they want me. Information about humans. If I take a shuttle with the core, I can draw them away while the Nexus escapes." "Absolutely not," Zoral said firmly. "I will not sacrifice a diplomatic representative." Another hit rocked the ship. Shields at 65%. "You're not sacrificing me," Ilara insisted. "I'm making a choice. For the safety of the Nexus and for my people, the colony who have no idea they're in danger." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Captain, for my entire life, I've been a symbol of a dead world. Now I know humanity lives on. I have a duty to protect them." Zoral held her gaze for a long moment, his alien features impossible to read. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Prepare Shuttle 3 for immediate launch," he ordered. "And may whatever gods humans believe in watch over you, Ambassador Reeves." Ilara sprinted to the lab to retrieve the data core, then to the shuttle bay. Within minutes, she was at the controls of the small craft, breathing deeply to calm her nerves. It had been years since she piloted anything more complex than a training simulator. "Shuttle bay doors opening," came the controller's voice. "Ambassador, good luck." The shuttle shot out from the warning. Hull breach in aft compartment. Emergency seals engaged. Ilara scrambled back to the controls, abandoning stealth for speed. The shuttle burst from behind the asteroid, engines flaring as she pushed them to emergency power. "This is Ambassador Ilara Reeves to any Alliance vessels," she broadcast, knowing it was likely futile. "I'm under attack by Void Consortium forces. They're pursuing information about a human colony. Repeat, a human colony has survived." She attached the coordinates for the Nexus to find if they survived their own encounter. The pursuing vessel fired again, this time hitting the shuttle's primary propulsion system. The small craft spun wildly, control surfaces failing to respond. "Warning, critical system failure. Collision imminent." Through the view screen, Ilara saw a massive asteroid looming before her. With no way to alter course, impact was inevitable. In her final seconds of control, she secured the data core and the shuttle's emergency beacon, a last desperate attempt to preserve the information. The impact, when it came, was surprisingly gentle. Instead of the crushing force she expected, Ilara felt herself suspended, as though caught in an invisible net. The shuttle's descent toward the asteroid's surface slowed, then stopped entirely. "What the hell?" she murmured, checking her instruments. They showed a tractor beam of unknown configuration holding the shuttle in place, but the consortium ships used kinetic harpoons, not tractor technology. A new vessel emerged from behind the asteroid, sleek and silver, with organic curves unlike the angular designs of Alliance craft. It positioned itself between Ilara's shuttle and the approaching consortium ship. A transmission cut through the static on her comms. "Damaged vessel, stand by for retrieval. Void hunters, depart immediately or face consequence." The message was in perfect, unaccented trade language, but something about the cadence struck Ilara as familiar, almost human. The consortium ship hesitated, then fired on the newcomer. The silver vessel absorbed the impact without visible damage to its hull. It responded with a single pulse of energy that disabled the consortium ship's weapon systems. "Final warning," came the transmission. "Depart." The consortium vessel retreated, joining its companion at the edge of the asteroid field. Ilara watched in disbelief as both ships jumped to light speed, abandoning the pursuit. Her shuttle began to move, drawn toward the silver vessel's docking bay. Ilara tensed, retrieving the data core and checking the small disruptor pistol she'd taken from the Nexus armory. She might have escaped the consortium only to face a different threat. As the shuttle settled onto the deck of the larger ship's bay, Ilara took a deep breath and prepared for whatever awaited her. The airlock cycled, pressure equalizing. The door slid open to reveal a tall figure in an environmental suit, helmet obscuring their features. Behind them stood two more similarly dressed individuals. "Are you injured?" the lead figure asked, their voice slightly distorted by their helmet speaker. "No," Ilara replied cautiously. "Who are you? Why did you help me?" Questions later, the figure said, "This docking bay isn't fully pressurized for your physiology. Please come with us." Something in the phrasing caught Ilara's attention. "My physiology specifically. How do you know what I need?" The figure paused, then reached up to remove their helmet. Ilara gasped. The face that emerged was undeniably human. A woman with dark skin and close-cropped silver hair, her eyes sharp with intelligence and caution. "Because," the woman said, "we're the same species, Ambassador Reeves, and we've been looking for you for a very long time." The woman introduced herself as Captain Imani Okafor of the scout vessel Pathfinder. As they moved through the ship's corridors, Ilara noticed subtle differences from Alliance designs, everything slightly adapted for human ergonomics rather than the multi-species compromises she was accustomed to. "How did you find me?" Ilara asked as they entered what appeared to be a medical bay. Okafor gestured for her to sit on an examination table. "We detected your transmission to the Alliance. We've been monitoring that frequency since we learned of your existence." A medical officer approached, scanning Ilara with equipment that looked both familiar and strange, recognizably medical, but with technology she didn't recognize. "You know who I am?" Ilara asked, surprised. "Ambassador Ilara Reeves, last known survivor of Earth, serving as Human Affairs Liaison to the Galactic Alliance," Okafor recited. "We have extensive intelligence on Alliance activities, including your role." The medical officer stepped back. "She's suffering mild concussion and elevated stress hormones, but otherwise healthy, Captain." Okafor nodded. "Good. Ambassador, once you're cleared, I'll take you to the bridge. We have a lot to discuss." "Wait," Ilara said, reaching for the data core she'd kept clutched in her hand. "This contains coordinates for a human colony, Novaterra in the Cygnus Reach. If you're human, you need to know about this." A strange expression crossed Okafor's face, something between amusement and sadness. "We know all about Novaterra, Ambassador. That's where we're from." Ilara felt as though the floor had dropped from beneath her. "You're from the colony, but how are you out here?" The message in the satellite said. "The beacon network was established nearly 50 years ago," Okafor explained. "Novaterra has advanced significantly since then. We now maintain a small fleet of scout vessels that patrol the borders of our territory. The Pathfinder is one of them." The medical officer completed his examination and nodded to Okafor. She gestured for Ilara to follow her to the bridge. Unlike the open command centers of Alliance vessels, the Pathfinder's bridge was compact and efficient, clearly designed for a small crew. The view screens showed they were moving away from the asteroid field at high speed. "We're setting course for Novaterra," Okafor explained, taking the captain's chair. "Direct route, no stops at the remaining beacons." Ilara stared at the crew, all human, all working with quiet efficiency at their stations. After a lifetime as the lone human among aliens, the sight was both comforting and deeply disorienting. "How many?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How many humans survived?" Okafor's expression softened slightly. "The original colony ship Artemis carried 10,000. Today, Novaterra has a population of approximately 3 million. Ilara sat heavily in the offered chair, struggling to process the information. 3 million, she repeated. All this time. I thought I was the last. And we thought the same of our colony, Okafor replied. Until our long-range sensors began detecting Alliance communications about 15 years ago. We learned about Earth's destruction and the scattered survivors. And eventually, we learned about you. Why didn't you contact the Alliance? Ilara asked. Why maintain secrecy? Okafor's expression hardened. Because, Ambassador, we have good reason to believe the destruction of Earth was no natural disaster. And some of those responsible have positions of influence within your alliance. The journey to Novaterra took 5 days at the Pathfinder's maximum sustainable speed. During that time, Ilara learned more about the colony and its history. The Artemis had been one of 3 generation ships launched in secret by a coalition of Earth nations in the final days before the fall. Its mission had been exploratory, to establish a self-sufficient colony far from Earth's increasingly unstable political situation. The other 2 ships, Odyssey and Icarus, had been lost during the journey. We always assumed they were destroyed, explained Dr. Maya Chen, the ship's science officer and granddaughter of Commander Sophia Chen from the recorded message. But after finding you, who knows? They might have established colonies of their own. Novaterra itself sounded remarkable, a world with Earth-like gravity and atmosphere. Though with higher oxygen content that had led to evolutionary adaptations, the colonists were still adjusting to. They had built their society from scratch, maintaining Earth's cultural heritage, while developing new traditions suited to their new home. But why stay hidden? Ilara pressed during one of their conversations in the ship's mess hall. 3 million humans living in isolation when you could be part of the galactic community. Maya exchanged glances with Captain Okafor, who nodded slightly. Show her, Okafor said. Maya accessed a terminal, bringing up a series of images and data. These are sensor readings from Earth's destruction, not the official Alliance records. These are our own observations from deep space telescopes the Artemis deployed during its journey. Ilara examined the data, her scientific training allowing her to interpret the complex readings. What she saw chilled her to the bone. These energy signatures, she said slowly, they're not consistent with solar flares. No, Maya confirmed grimly. They're weapons signatures. Earth wasn't destroyed by natural causes. It was attacked, systematically and deliberately obliterated. By whom?